Okay. Parsha Shmini. Vahi bayom Shmini. It was on the 8th day. So let's put things in perspective. What day on the calendar was this 8th day? It was the 8th day of the dedication of the Mishkan. What was the calendar date of this 8th day? You know? It was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. You know when Rosh Chodesh Nisan is coming? It's Shabbos. This Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So the events of Parsha Shmini happens 5 days from now. Rosh Chodesh Nisan. You ready for Rosh Chodesh Nisan? This Shabbos. How many Torahs are you going to take out? 3. One for Shabbos, one for Rosh Chodesh, and one for Parshat HaChodesh. Okay. So now it's the 8th day. Vahi vayom Shmini. What happens? So it says that Hashem told Aaron to take an egel ben bakar. Very interesting. An egel is a calf. Aaron was accused of making the golden calf. So seeing Aaron, believe me, walking around with a calf may have been offensive to some people. But Hashem says it's a symbol that I forgave him for the sin of the golden calf. So Hashem gave Aaron the korban to bring was a calf, an unusual korban. Then Hashem says to the Jewish people, I want you to bring a goat, a seir izim. Why did he bring a goat? What was the purpose of the goat? Also very interesting. The purpose of the goat was to forgive them for the sale of Yosef, Mechiras Yosef. Because when they sold Yosef, they slaughtered a goat and they dipped his coat in the blood of the goat. Now, Mechiras Yosef happened how many years ago? 200 years ago? 300 years ago? Why all of a sudden? They just set up the Mishkan. And Hashem says to Moshe, oh, let's get all the Jews together, and we're going to bring a korban on behalf of all the Jews. What korban? A goat. Why? That we should forgive them for Mechiras Yosef. It's unusual. What was the cause of Mechiras Yosef? Why did the brothers sell Yosef? What was their emotional issue? Why did the brothers sell him?
Because they thought he was talking Lashon Hara about them.
Okay, so what was the emotional? Lashon Hara is going to be next week. We're going to talk about that. What was the emotional issue?
Anger,
part of it, but what was really
resentment,
jealousy, resentment?
Yeah.
They were jealous, right? Dad loves you more than me. They were jealous. That's a problem. Now comes the Jewish people. They're being all set up. And Hashem says to them, okay, you're going to have Kohanim and Leviim and general Jews, and the Kohanim are going to do all the work. What could be created with all of this? Jealousy. So you know what Hashem says? Hold on, we cannot have any jealousy. We don't want you to be jealous of the Kohen, the Levi, whatever it is. Therefore, let's get this out of the way. How do we get it out of the way? We bring the goat, we talk about the sale of Yosef, and we ask for forgiveness. Mechiras Yosef. So to get that out of the way. Now, by the way, they reached a point of appreciation because Yosef, it was in his zchut that the Yam Suf split. So the Jews got to Har Sinai, got the Torah, are now establishing the Mishkan, all because Yosef was with them and got them across the Yam Suf. So for the first time in a long time, the Jews began to appreciate who Yosef was. When a person's alive, we often don't appreciate those around us. But when the person's gone, what happens? You begin to miss him. You begin to appreciate him. So now that Yosef had done so much for them, when he was alive, they didn't appreciate him as much as now. So what was now was a very, very good opportunity to settle accounts. Now, it's interesting. At the Seder, we talk about Yosef. Why? we dip twice at the Seder. We dip the karpas in salt water, and we dip the maror in charoses. One dipping is to remind us that before we left Egypt, Hashem told us to dip the straw into blood and put it on the doorpost. So by Makat B'chorot, Hashem passed over. That's one dipping. But you know what the other dipping is? At the very beginning of the Seder, we dip the karpas, the celery, we use potatoes, in salt water. What is that to remember? The sale of Yosef. When they sold Yosef, they dipped his coat in blood, and we're dipping. Why do we remember that at the Seder? Because when you sit around the Seder table, and you're there with your family, and your children, and your grandchildren, one of the first questions you have to ask yourself is, okay, we're very happy Hashem took us out of Egypt. That's fantastic. It was miraculous. But how do we get to Egypt in the first place? Because I understand, we got out. But how do we get there? You know, we were living in Israel. We were living in Canaan. Abraham was happy. Yitzchak was happy. Yaakov was happy. So we say, well, the brothers were jealous, and they sold Yosef, and they ended up selling him to someone from Egypt, and he got down to Egypt, and then they went down to look for him because of the hunger. So we can't even begin the Seder and get into the details of what happened without figuring out how we got there in the first place. So we talk about the dipping of Yosef's coat in blood, and we dip the karpas in salt water to remind us of how we got there. Because if we don't know how we got to Egypt in the first place, we can make the same mistakes again. So believe it or not, the Mishkan is being set up, and Hashem is telling everybody, let's do what we have to do to get kapara for the sale of Yosef. Got it. How does that tie in? Pesach is around the corner. We're going to do the exact same thing at the Seder. We're going to talk about Yosef, why he was sold, good, bad, right, wrong. We got to get into it. Because if we don't get into it, we're never going to understand what's going on. Okay. Then comes the next thing. Very difficult, but it's the next thing. Let's talk about it briefly. It says that it's a very interesting pasuk that Vayomer Vayakrev, okay, they bring everybody together, and then it says Vayomer Moshe. Moshe says to Aaron and his children and to everybody, Zeh hadovo asher tziva Hashem tazu. This is what Hashem told you to do, and if you do it, V'yera alechem kavod Hashem. Hashem will appear. So the Sifri, very interesting comment on the Sifri. The Sifri says, this is what you should do, and Hashem will come. Sifri says, so what is this thing they should do? So the Sifri says, get rid of your Yetzer Hara. Now, that Sifri is cryptic, it's hard to understand. We always have to try to get rid of our Yetzer Hara. What Yetzer Hara are you referring to? So the Meforshim say, the Yetzer Hara changes all the time. Every generation has their own Yetzer Hara. At one point, there was idol worship. At some point, it could be money. Today, who knows what it could be? It could be gambling, it could be drugs, it could be a lot of different things. There's always, the Yetzer Hara learns from the environment and changes all the time. But let me tell you what the Nitziv says. Very interesting Nitziv. The Nitziv says, you know what the Yetzer Hara is? People like to be creative. You know what it means to be creative? What does it mean to be creative?
Do something.
Do something fresh,
yeah.
different. He says, Hashem says to you, this is how I want you to serve me. You know what people say? Yeah, that's for everybody else. I'm going to find new ways to serve Hashem. Is Hashem interested in new ways to serve Hashem? Not at all. Hashem wants you to do the right way. Nadav and Avihu said, we can do it better. We can take Hashem's instructions and we can improve on it. What did it cost them? Their lives. I remember years ago in shul when I was the rabbi of the shul, I had a lady come over to me, and the lady said to me, I want to wear a talit during davening. She said that to me. I said, why? She says, wow, men put that talit around them, It's like they're surrounded by mitzvos, and they feel God all around them. I want to feel the same thing. Okay. So, and she was serious. She wants to wear a talit. So I asked her, because this lady likes to chew gum. This was a lady who liked to chew gum. And have you ever, sometimes when you have people who chew gum, they crack the gum in there. Have you ever been on the phone with someone chewing gum and cracking it? How does it sound? What?
Good. Sounds good.
Sounds good. I find it obnoxious, but it just sounds good. So I said to her, do you ever talk on the phone and have someone chewing gum in your ear? She says yes. I said to her, do you feel close to that person when they do that? She says, no, I want to get off the phone. It's obnoxious. So I said, imagine if that person says, I'm chewing gum in that person's ear because I want to get closer to them. Would that person be right or wrong? That person would be wrong. I'm not going to get close to them. I want to get away from them. So I says, in order to get close to a person, you have to know what they like, right? Do what they like. Don't do what they don't like. You want to get closer to Hashem? Yeah, I want to get closer to Hashem. What does Hashem like? She says, I don't know. So I says, well, why don't you first find out what Hashem likes? And then you can get closer to him. But if Hashem doesn't like women wearing a talit, and you go ahead thinking you're going to get closer to Hashem by wearing a talit, but he doesn't like it, are you going to get closer to him? Not at all. She understood that. I was walking one Shabbos morning to shul, and it was 6:30 in the morning because I was going Hashkama. I go early morning, Shabbos morning, and there was a guy outside on his balcony with a talit, davening shacharit out loud with his hands up like to the heavens. I'm walking by, and this guy is saying Shema Yisrael, in the middle at 6:30 in the morning. I mean, people on the street, there weren't that many people, a few people walking their dogs were looking like this guy had lost his marbles. So I looked at the guy and I said to him, excuse me, I knew who he was. I said to him, what are you doing? What are you doing? He says, it's such a moving experience to be on my balcony, 6:30 in the morning, it was dead of winter, it was freezing out, davening to God. I said, well, we live in Kew Gardens. Kew Gardens has hundreds, thousands of Jewish people. I said to him, anybody else doing that? No. I said, have you ever wondered if it's so moving and inspirational and so exciting, why you're the only one? When you're the only one doing something, usually it's not normal. I said, what do you think God is thinking now? God is looking down on Kew Gardens, and you're the only one out there. What do you think God is thinking? This is wonderful? Maybe God is thinking, go inside and stay warm, and wait for an hour and go to shul, and daven in a minyan and hear Kriyas HaTorah. What do you think God is thinking? Because you're doing this to get closer to God. So let's figure it out. What do you think God is saying? Okay, it was a very short conversation. I went on my way, and for weeks he was still outside. So he didn't hear a word I said. You know what? Straight over his head. Got it. Forget about it. The Panim Yafos, he says on this Sifri, very interesting. He says, you know what the Yetzer Hara of that time was? Ga'ava, haughtiness. They just built the Mishkan. It was a house for Hashem. The Jews were walking around saying, whoa, we have now Hashem who had left this world. And they talk about they went in 7 different heavens. We brought him back down. We're the greatest nation in the world. So the Sifri says, Hashem said to the Jewish people, I got news for you. If you walk around with that attitude, I'm going to leave again. So you got to get rid of that Yetzer Hara. The Imrei Emes, which was the R.Rabbi, the 4th R.Rabbi, he says, you know what that Yetzer Hara was? Machloket. He says, you just built the biggest shul that the congregation of Israel ever had. You know what their first debate was? Who's going to be the president? Who's going to be the vice president? Who's going to be the gavai? Who's going to sit in the front? Who's going to sit on the eastern wall? Who's going to get the aliyah? Who's going to get shlishi? Who's going to get shishi? Who's going to get maftir?
What is machloket? Illness?
Machloket means arguments, fighting. So the Imrei Emes says, you know what the Sifri says? You want Hashem. You want to be part of the Jewish people. You want things to grow. Get rid of that Yetzer Hara. Get rid of the need to argue and to fight and always to be the best and the top and the first. Get rid of that. So there are a few different approaches, what kind of Yetzer Hara that the Sifri was talking about. Anyway, Nadav and Avihu, they, for whatever the reason, there are many different reasons what their mistake was, but in the end, they lost their lives. They lost their lives. It says, Vayidom Aharon. Aaron was quiet. Now, what's the Hebrew word for quiet? If you wanted to say in Israel, modern Hebrew, to be quiet, what's the Hebrew word? Sheket. Shtika, sheket. Vayidom is a very unusual word. When we refer to something as a domain that has no mouth, doesn't talk, we refer to a rock. A domain is a rock on the ground. Shtika, you know what quiet means? When the person says, shtok, quiet. Why does the person say to you quiet? Because he sees by your lips that you want to say something. And he sees from the way you're acting that you're going to open your mouth and you're going to say something. So he's telling you, keep your mouth shut. Aharon had nothing to say. He was like a rock. It's a totally different level of quiet. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that he was angry at God because Hashem took his two children. And he had a lot to say, but he held it back. And you could see that he was holding it back. You can see that, especially when you're dealing with children. You know, you can see a parent say to a kid, don't say another word. Don't say another word. I warned you. You say another word, you're going to be in your room for the next 6 weeks. Don't say another word. That's shtika. Vayidom is a totally different thing. So it says, Vayidom Aaron. He was complete quiet. He had not even a question. Like, why? Why now? Why couldn't it wait? What happened? He had no questions. Then, it's interesting, who does Moshe instruct to carry the boys, Nadav and Avihu, out and take care of their burial? Who does he instruct?
Nephew or three.
He instructs their uncles.
Uncles.
Right?
Uncle's son. No?
He instructs their uncles, and he says to them, he says, Vayikra Moshe el Mishael ve'el el Tzofim b'nei Uziel dod Aaron, Aaron's uncles, and says, you take care of these two boys.
Brothers.
You take care of the burial. He didn't ask the brothers. He didn't ask Elazar and Itzamar.
But he told them brothers, take your brothers, right?
No. He told the uncles.
No, he told them, take your brothers out.
Right, but he didn't tell the brothers to do it.
No.
He told the brothers, don't do it. So the question is, why not? So the answer is that Elazar and Isamar, at this moment, was the first day they were Kohanim. They had a rule of Kohanim Gedolim. A Kohen Gadol can never become Tameh even to a relative. A regular Kohen can. They could not. When the first day that they were made into Kohanim, they were on the highest level of Kahuna. They were like Kohanim Gedolim. So therefore, Moshe had the only choice he had was to take two Levis. They were relatives, and they were going to take care of the burial. So that's who they took care of them. Now, we have Pesach coming up. This happened on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. 14 days later, all the Jewish people would bring the Korban Pesach. What happened that day? It was the middle of the Korban Pesach. People came over to Moshe and said, Moshe, we're Tameh. We can't bring the Korban Pesach. It's not fair. And then Moshe spoke to Hashem, and Hashem made Pesach Sheni, a second opportunity. They all asked the question, who were these people that were Tameh? In general, nobody died in the desert, unless by Korach and different sins. But in general, people didn't die. Everybody was always tahor. There were no dead bodies. So who were these people? So they say, you know who they were? They were Mishael and Elitzapha, the people who took care of Aaron's two children. Moshe, you told us to bury them. So we buried them. We were doing what you told us. Now we're going to miss out the Korban Pesach? No fair. Okay. Problem. When you're Tameh, How many days do you need to get tahor?
7.
7 days. You sprinkle the ashes of the Parah Aduma on day 3 and day 7. Then you go to the mikvah. 7 days you're clean. Aaron's children died Rosh Chodesh Nisan. They had 14 days. So now Moshe could have said to them, what's your problem? I told you to bury them was 2 weeks ago. You had plenty of time to get tahor. You didn't do it, that's not my fault. That's not on me. I give you 14 days to do an assignment that you only need 7, and you can choose any of the 14 days you want. You have plenty of time to get tahor.
Like 7 days to go, 7 days.
So we answered, once we talked about this, that Moshe told them,
Bury them.
don't bury them here. Bury them in Hor HaHor, where Aaron would be buried in 40 years from now. And that took him 7 days to travel there, 7 days to travel back. So they only got back on the 14th day. So now, they said to Moshe, we were following your instructions. It's not fair. Okay. If you were Hashem, and you wanted to give them a second chance, you know what I would have said? No problem. We'll sprinkle the ashes on you right away, day 3, day 7, and this way you'll be tahor the last day of Pesach, and then you can bring the korban on the last day of Pesach. At least the last day of Pesach, it's still Pesach. And you still have matzah and no chametz, and it's a chag. The 7th day of Pesach is a Yom Tov, we don't work. What day was Pesach Sheni? Yudalid Iyar, a month later.
Months.
Why in heaven's name was Yudalid Iyar the day for Pesach Sheni? I mean, you have to appreciate the question. A person says to you, it's coming New Year's, right? And a person says to you, you know what, I missed New Year's. So you might say to the person, no problem. We'll have a party today, January 2nd. Or maybe we'll wait till January 7th, because that's the Greek Orthodox New Year's. I don't know what it is. But you wouldn't say to the person, oh, okay, February 1st will be New Year's. What's special about February 1st? Nothing. On the calendar, the 14th day of Iyar, which is 30 days after Pesach, is anything special on that day? Did anything happen on that day? Did anything happen in Egypt on that day? Absolutely nothing. It is a day on the calendar that has no special significance. And that's the day Hashem says, okay, on that day you bring the Korban Pesach, we'll have more matzah again and everything else. How did they get Yud Daled Iyar? That means if you were Tomei on April 7th, so Hashem says, okay, come May 7th. What is May 7th? Nothing. Any thoughts on that, gentlemen, ladies?
Pesach Sheni.
But why? Why is it a month later? I'll give you a thought. Listen to this thought. But you have to think about it. You understand the question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Listen to a thought. Let's say we were planning to go to Jerusalem, to Yerushalayim, to bring the Korban Pesach. It's January. It's the middle of winter in Israel. And we live up north in Israel. We live in Tzfas, or Tveria. And we're talking, a few of us live in the same little city. Our city was called Tashkent or whatever. But we're talking, and we said we're going to go April, on the 14th day of Nisan, we're going to go to Yerushalayim to bring the Korban Pesach. So we take out our calendar, our Bukharian calendar, and we circle Yudaled Nisan. Okay? But then I say to you, hold on. In Yerushalayim, the Sanhedrin could always make it a leap year. They didn't have a calendar that we have today. What happens if they make it a leap year?
Mm.
So Pesach is going to be a month
Later.
So let's circle a month later, because maybe that's when Pesach's going to be. What day is that? Yudaled Iyar.
Yeah.
So it comes out every single year, when we plan our trip to Yerushalayim, Yudaled Iyar is always the backup. Because it could be a leap year, they put it in an extra month. So Yudaled Iyar is always Pesach Sheni. If there's no leap year, then you're right, Yud Dalet Nisan is. But if there is a leap year, the whole calendar is pushed back a month, so Yud Dalet Iyar is always a possible date. That's why it's Pesach Sheni. It's a very fascinating answer.
So in leap year now in Israel, so anyways, you Dalit.
You're right. So this year is a leap year. So now Yud Dalet Nisan is a month later. That's why Pesach falls out in April. And Yud Dalet Iyar is always on the calendar as the backup anyway. So we keep it the same. Even though this year with the leap year, it doesn't make a difference. But you're right. We keep it the same.
That's basically the deadline.
What?
It's basically the deadline that tells you.
It's always the deadline. It's always Yud Dalet Iyar is always a possibility that that's going to be when Pesach is going to be. We never know. Now we know because we have a calendar. We know every 3rd, 6th, 9, 11, 13, 17, 19. We have a cycle. But in the olden days, they didn't have a cycle. It was based on the weather. If it was still rainy, they delayed it a month. If the roads were muddy, they delayed it a month. You know, they had their cycle as to what it was and what it wasn't in order to figure it out. Okay. Let's go figure out the next step. The next step, what I'm going to share with you, gets a little bit more complicated. And I'm going to see if I can try to make it a little clearer for you. But I want to get myself ready for it. Okay. In the Torah, in Parsha Shmini, after we finished with the dedication, and there were 10 special crowns that they got, and maybe if we have time we'll go over it, we have all the rules of kosher. What is kosher? What is not kosher? Okay. There is a book, a sefer, called Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch is the book of mitzvos. How many mitzvos are there? 613. We generally follow whose order of the 613 mitzvos. Who listed for us all 613 mitzvos? The Rambam. And we generally follow the Rambam. The Ramban, with the letter Nun at the end, he has a different approach. So many of them are the same, but there are some differences. For example, the Rambam says it's a mitzvah to check animals to see if they're kosher. So he has a mitzvah to check animals if they chew their cud and have split hoofs, and fish if they have fins and scales, and grasshoppers, and birds. He lists each one as a separate mitzvah, and he goes through it in great detail.
Rav?
What?
Rambam is the one that worked for Sultan.
The Ramban, right.
The Emadan, right?
Correct.
Rambam, okay.
The Ramban says, there's no mitzvah to check for those things. We know what's kosher, what's not kosher. There's a mitzvah to keep kosher. He puts them all into one big mitzvah. So he has other mitzvahs that he substitutes. But the Sefer HaChinuch, what it does is, it goes through every single mitzvah. It tells you what the mitzvah is. It tells you what the logic behind the mitzvah is. Right? For example, when it comes to eating kosher, he'll say to you that kosher is a health issue. Not for your bodies only, but for your soul. And he'll bring down stories, not him directly, but other people, that there were kids who were learning in yeshiva and nothing went into their heads. They just couldn't understand the Gemara. And they went to the Mukubal, and the Mukubal says, check the butcher shop. He's selling treif meat. And they found out to be true. And because they were eating treif meat, they couldn't absorb Torah. So he'll bring down the reasons behind the mitzvahs. Then he'll tell you, do the mitzvahs apply today or not today? Do they apply to men, to women, to everybody? And then Art Scroll did a fantastic job in putting this together. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating. I'm doing now Tazria. I happen to have been doing Shmini over the last few weeks. It's amazing what is written here. And it's translated into English. So, and this series is 10 volumes. Okay, so I'm on volume 3. It's 10 volumes. By the time you finish all 10 volumes, you'll go through all 613 mitzvot. You'll have discussed a whole section of the Rambam. You'll have gone through many of the Gemaras on the mitzvot. And you as if you were in yeshiva for 20 years. That's how much knowledge is over here. It's fantastic.
That's Rambam.
all based on the list compiled by Rambam.
But Rambam, he wrote the book of Sefer
He
HaChinuk.
wrote a Sefer HaMitzvos in the Yad Chazakah, the Rambam. The Chinuch took it from there, broke it down each mitzvah, and then wrote on it explanations behind
But
it.
who wrote the HaChinuk? Sefer
The
HaChinuk.
author is not listed. Some people say it was one of the Rishonim called the Ra'ah, but there's no name. It was a book that was found, but there was no author.
Okay.
And he writes in his introduction that he did it so people should understand the mitzvahs. Okay? So let's go through one of them. I'll show you, an interesting approach to it. Let's go through one of them. For fish to be kosher, what are the signs?
Fins and scales.
Fins and scales. Okay, fins and scales. Now, it's interesting, the Hebrew word for fins is sinapir. You know how to spell sinapir? If I take the letter sinapir, I can take the letter pei, yud, resh, and I put the samach in the beginning, and I read it like an English word. You know what sinapir spells? Fins. So in the word sinapir is the word fins in English. Cute, right? Kaskesis, the shin and the ku spell scales. Just I add a lamed to it. The word kaskesis is scales. Okay. So in order for a fish to be kosher, it has to have fins and scales. So then the Gemara says, what happens if I have a fish, the head is chopped off, so I have no way of knowing if it had fins, but it has scales. Is the fish kosher?
Yes.
Yes. Why is it kosher?
No
Because
fish.
there's no fish, there's no scales without fins.
So the Gemara says, thank you, that's excellent. That is a Gemara, I think in Chulin. The Gemara says, all fish that have scales have
Has
fins.
to have fins.
Okay. So it begs the question, so why does the Torah say I need both signs? Why did the Torah just say, you know what the sign of a kosher fish is? Scales. Why does it mention fins at all?
Because if you run into a situation where you have either one, you should know.
So the Gemara says,
It's like playing with-
Lahagdil Torah v'yadir. It's just a way of making the Torah greater, bigger, nicer, that you can have two signs instead of one. Many things have two signs, but we don't need two signs. Scales by itself is enough. Okay. Very difficult. One of the Perushim he brings down over here, he says is, no, what the Gemara is really saying is that if I didn't know that I need fins and scales, I only had the one word, snapir, I might think that's fins. I wouldn't know it means scales. By having snapir, kaskesis, I write down both words, so now I know I have fins and scales. Okay. Next. He asks the question that the Gemara brings down that there is no fish that has scales that doesn't have fins. Okay? Now this is 2,000 years ago. In the last 2,000 years, with ocean exploration and submarines and all these things, how many new species of fish have been discovered
A lot.
over the last 2,000 years?
A lot.
Tens of thousands. Okay. Isn't it a little risky to make a statement
2,000.
that every single fish that has scales has fins, when there were at that time tens of thousands of species of fish that no one ever knew about? In North America, in Alaska, under the ocean, deep ocean. Okay. Came about 400 years ago, and he brings this down over here in his book. About 400 years ago, there was a commentary on the Mishnayos called the Tosfos Yom Tov. And it was written by Rav Yom Tov Lipman Heller. Now, the Tosfos Yom Tov is buried in Poland, in Krakow. I know this because he's buried about 30 feet from the Ramah in a small Krakow cemetery, and I've been there. I've been there a few times. The Ramah Shul, and right behind the Ramah Shul is the cemetery, and the Ramah is buried there, and the Bach is buried there, bless you, the Megale Amukos is buried there, some very famous people, and one of the people buried there is the Tosos Yom Tov. Okay. One day he's sitting in the Beis Medrash, he's learning, and a man comes with a fish. And the name of the fish was called the Stinkas, Stincas, marinus. It was a type of fish that had scales, but no fins. As a matter of fact, it couldn't swim through the water because it had no fins. It watered through the water with little feet. It had little feet, but it was covered in scales. And the fisherman who brought this to the Tosos Yom Tov says to him, is this fish kosher or not? It has scales, doesn't have fins. Is it kosher? On top of that, this fish was a dangerous toxin. It was a poisonous fish. It's like the puffer fish. If you tell me it's kosher, how could Hashem make a kosher fish that is poisonous? Do we not say about Hashem, D'rachecha darkei noam, his ways are always pleasant? Now there may be a way to remove the toxin, but that was his question. So the Tosos Yom Tov goes back and forth with this, and he says you're making a big mistake. There are many life forms in the ocean. Just because you live in the ocean doesn't make you a fish. For example, is a dolphin a fish? No, it's a mammal. Is a whale a fish? No, it's a mammal. This is not a fish because it has feet. It walks. It's like a crab. It's like a lobster. It's not a fish. So you can have aquatic life that have scales and no fins. That's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says fish that have scales have fins. So this is treif. It's not kosher. Don't show me the fins and say, like the pig, look, my hoofs are split. Doesn't work. Okay? And he brings that down. But it was a fascinating question. And in the Ein Yaakov, the son of the Rambam, Avraham ben Moshe. That means the Rambam was Moshe ben Maimon. The Rambam had a son named Avraham. This is for you Sephardim. Because if the Rambam was a Sephardi, what was his son? Sephardi. And we go like the Rambam, right? You know, the Rambam is the pillar, is the cornerstone of the Shulchan Aruch. The Rabbi Yosef Karo follows the Rambam. And we still have some time yet, so you're lucky.
Is he Bukharin?
He must be Bukhari. When I tell you what he says, you'll say for sure he's Bukhari. He says something fascinating. Listen to what he says.
This is his son, Ramban.
The Rambam, with the Mem Sofit, his son, Avraham ben Moshe. Okay?
Oh, so Ramban is completely different.
Right. Ramban is Rav Moshe ben Nachman, and the Rambam is Rav Moshe Maimonides.
Maimonides.
Correct.
Oh, they lived in different times.
No, they overlapped, but one lived in Spain and one lived in different
In Turkey.
Correct.
Okay.
So, Rabbi Avram, the son of the Rambam, says there are many Gemaras that share scientific information. But that was based on the knowledge they had at the time. It wasn't Nevuah, and it wasn't Torah Misinai. So if that information is wrong, that's okay. It was based on the knowledge at the time. So let's understand this. There's a Gemara that says the sun goes around the earth. So people say, the Gemara can't be true. The sun doesn't go around the earth. We know that to be not true. So Rav Avram, the son of the Rambam, says that's okay. In those days, people thought that. All the Gemara was doing was telling you what people thought. They shared their knowledge with you. They weren't telling you Moshe is told from Har Sinai, a Mesorah, that the sun goes around the earth. Had nothing to do with Moshe. Moshe never said that, and that's not the Torah. There's the Torah, and there's Gemara knowledge. Gemara knowledge is based on the era and time they lived. For example, in the Gemara it says that if a black cat crosses your path, it's good luck, and a white cat is bad luck. In the world, it's just the opposite. Tell me something. You think if a cat crosses your path, it's good or bad today?
Don't think.
Not at all. In those days, they had a world like that, maybe with demons and shady. We don't have that today. It's not that the Gemara is right or the Gemara is wrong. It was at the time that was different. The Rambam, in the first few pages of the Rambam, he has a list of health suggestions. How many of them apply today? Not many. The Gemara, in the olden days, they used to let blood. They used to always draw blood, let blood. They had all these type of cures for all different ailments. Do they work? No. What did the Meforshim say? Our bodies have changed. We're weakened. We're not the same people that were 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Our bodies, our physiology has changed. So those things may have worked then. They don't work now. Does that make the Gemara false? No. The Gemara was not saying this is a message from God. The Gemara was saying from our experience, these are things that work. If you have this illness, try this. Back then, it worked. Today, it doesn't. It doesn't make the Gemara false. Let me give you some examples, which makes things. Now, people disagree. The Rivash disagrees. The Pri Chadash disagrees. They say no, can't be. It's two schools of thought. No, but they're both very established schools of thought. I'll give you an example. Would you eat on the same plate meat and fish? No. We don't eat meat and fish. As a matter of fact, on Friday night, if we have gefilte fish, we have a separate plate and we have a separate fork. Okay, then we get a different plate, a different fork. Why don't we eat meat and fish together?
It's dangerous for the body.
It's dangerous. What's the danger? What could it cause?
Not sure.
Toxic.
That's an honest answer. I appreciate honesty. The Gemara says it causes leprosy. Okay. Do non-Jewish people eat meat and fish together? All the time. Anybody getting leprosy? When was the last time someone got leprosy from eating meat and fish together?
Biblical times.
Yeah. Hasn't been for the last 2,000 years, has it? Not really. Okay? In the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, writes fish and milk. Now, everybody says it was a mistake. It meant basar, and whoever the printer was substituted the word by mistake. Some people don't eat fish and milk.
Sephardi don't eat.
Okay, so that means you never had a good lox with cream cheese and a bagel.
Yes, we do.
You're not allowed to.
You do, man. Not we.
Yeah, we do. I
Now
go to.
come on, now comes
Don't
out.
say
See,
we.
I'm an Ashkenazi.
Say
I happen not to like cream cheese, so that's okay. But I can have tuna fish with a glass of milk. What's that? You've had let's get the truth out over here. Come on.
Rabbi, go
You've
to a
had
bread
a
party.
good lox with cream cheese.
No, you can't.
Rabbi, you go to bread today. You go to a party.
Yeah.
They do the seder in the morning. It's fish and milk on the table.
On the
On
table.
the table, but not on the bread together. You do it.
He
Not
does.
everybody.
I don't know.
Don't say we.
I would eat the
Yeah,
fish and
yeah.
I would drink the
You
milk.
Milk. Okay. So, but we Ashkenazim of the opinion that the Mechaber never meant milk, he meant meat, and it was a mistake written. And it's brought down in the commentaries on the side that there was a mistake, that he never referred to it. But again, anybody has ever, I mean, we have more cases of measles than we have of leprosy. It has nothing to do with that. Yet, the catering industry would never cook meat in a fish pot, even if there's no fish inside. Now, my mother was a caterer, and she would say to me a very simple reason why. If you take a fish pot that hasn't been used for a week, and you put in just water and you cook that water, what's the whole house going to smell like?
Smell fish.
Smell like fish. So you're not going to put anything in it. You're not going to put bread or cheese or eggs or anything in that pot, because when you eat it, what are you going to taste? Fish. That's why you always have separate pots for fish. But the caterers will tell you that under the OU or the Star K, if they by mistake cook a chicken or meat in a fish pot, are they allowed to serve it? Some people will say no, even though nobody ever got leprosy. So, was the Gemara right? Was the Gemara wrong? According to the son of the Rambam, the Gemara in its time was right. But our bodies have changed. These things don't exist. We have other problems. We have other illnesses, other diseases.
Feels like more today is a more genetical than.
Right. You have water left over, open, uncovered. They wouldn't drink it in the olden days. You know why? Because they were afraid a snake would come in and drink from the water and leave its poison, and it could kill you. And they bring down stories like that. Now today, how many houses have snakes crawling around inside, drinking from water?
None, but they say there is like something spiritual can come over on the water.
They say that.
Today they say these things.
But science would say no. One of the suggestions in the Gemara, an interesting suggestion, was always wash your hands. Before we sit down in the meal, we wash our hands. If you touch fish with your hands in the meal, we wash our hands. At the end of the meal, we wash our hands. That happens to be medically sound. If you speak to any doctor today, before any doctor does anything, what do they tell you to do? Wash your hands. Before anybody in a restaurant serves food, they wash their hands, they put gloves on. So the Gemara put 2,000 years ago said to you, wash your hands. Always. Jews are always washing their hands. That is solid. That today, anybody would say, solid.
Okay, Rab, then how did Rambam was able to work for the Sultan and he was such a physician? How did he know such a secret?
Because in his day, his secrets worked.
Because my father used to read stories of the Rambam on Russian, and
Right.
he says they used to have these drops that would bring the sight back, give vision back to the person.
And if you try
Today
them today, they don't work. But that's not a pellet, that's not a surprise, because things have changed. I'll give you another thing that you may or may not appreciate. 50 years ago, 60, maybe 70 years ago, the wonder drug was penicillin. When they discovered penicillin, that was the wonder drug that cured everything. Today, it doesn't work as much. You know why? We became immune to it. They overused penicillin. So penicillin, our bodies don't react to penicillin like it used to. So there are a lot of illnesses today that penicillin won't cure. So what happened? Over 70 years, the wonder drug lost its wonder? No, we changed. Our bodies built resilience. We use, washing soap, antibacterial. Because if we use this antibacterial over and over again, we lose resistance to bacterial. We don't give little kids peanuts or almonds to eat, so when they get a little bit older, they are allergic to it, and they react to it. We overcompensate, and that changes our physiology. That's science. Does that make the science of 70 years ago wrong? No. It just changed. What changed? We changed. Give you another example. If you sleep on a bed and underneath the bed is food, what are you going to do with that food? You're going to throw it out,
Throw up. Yeah.
right? You're going to throw it out. Ashkenazim are not that strict about that, but the Evid will use that food. But Rabbi Yosef was very against it. So Sephardim, if you sleep on food, in camp, we bring these care packages to our grandchildren, to our kids in camp. Where do they keep their food? Under their beds. Then they go to sleep. The next morning they realize, I have candies and chocolate bars and soda under my bed, and I slept on my bed. If you're Sephardi, you know what they'll tell you? Throw it out. Don't use it.
Even though if it's sealed and
Even if it's sealed. Why? Why? Because it's tamei, it's whatever. Now, tell me something. You know anybody who eats that food that got sick? No. Now, you say, okay, nobody sleeps with food. Nobody sleeps with food under their bed. Come on, let's get real. But you know what happens that you don't realize? I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. In 2 weeks is Pesach. Okay? It's already 9:30. In 2 weeks is Pesach. And you go to Astroland or Great Adventures, Six Flags Great Adventures, or any of these amusement parks. You know what you're going to see? You're going to see hundreds and hundreds of people. And you're going to see mothers with strollers. And who's sitting in the stroller? The baby. And underneath the baby is a basket. And what's in that basket?
Food.
Food. And what happens with that baby in that stroller? What do the babies do 95% of the time?
Sleep.
Sleep. And it brings down. The Star K had this whole article that be careful, because if your babies fall asleep in the stroller and you have all that water and food underneath in the basket, which everybody keeps it, you can't eat that food. You got to throw it all out. So you're going to walk around on Chol HaMoed and you're going to see all these women. Have you ever gone to Aaron's or any of these stores? Women with strollers. They buy food, they buy stuff, they put it in the stroller underneath because they can't carry the stroller in the shopping cart. And then they go to the checkout, but the baby's sleeping in there. All that food that the baby was sleeping on, what are they supposed to do with it?
Eat.
Throw it out. If you're a Sephardi, you're going to throw it out. But Rabbi Yosef was crazy strict about that. Ashkenazim, not so much.
Yeah, but usually today they have a stroller and the baby, and they keep the baby's food under on the basket underneath them. Eventually they're gonna eat it.
You're not going to throw it out?
No.
No.
You're going to go tell them that you heard in a shir that if there's someone sleeps on food, you can't eat it if you're Sephardi. You'll be very popular. They'll all talk about you in the store. Just don't mention my
Not
name.
in the,
Just don't mention my name. Leave me out of it. What I'm trying to say to you is, there are many things that are brought down in the Gemara that really don't